Welcome back to another episode of the Jesus Cartel. With me, as always, Mr. Clay Russell. How are you, brother?
Man, I am good. I'm good. We were just talking. We've been in here preaching to each other for almost 30 minutes. Didn't set record on the cameras because we were just having conversation. And now our back's against the wall as far as how long we can do Jesus Cartel. Man,
Yeah.
we should have just pushed record a while back, I guess.
We should have. I mean, that's essentially what Jesus Cartel always is. But I don't know, man. It's just, you could realistically get a film crew, follow us around all day. Not because it's us. Any true Jesus-following Christian, you could follow them around all day, and each of their conversations is going to have incredible value. And I think that's one of the reasons that I love doing this. It's just to be clear, this is an inconvenience in terms of time. The Jesus Cartel is, but it has value, and so we're willing to be inconvenienced for value. And so, because this is going to be kind of a Jesus Cartel Express episode, or it's definitely going to be shorter than it normally is, I'm going to have to keep a close eye on the time because we're going to run into some other things. But let's go straight into the get to know you segment question. Okay. And you actually were asked a question that we're going to discuss a little bit today.
Yeah, so I was at the Women's Center this morning and doing group, and we had a great group there and had to deal with some stuff and everything, and everything was cool. And but at the end, Miss Robin asked a question. She said, "Hey, I got a question for you." I think I was actually in the office by this time. She said, "I got a question for you." And I said, "What is that?" And she said, "What is the most radical thing that you've ever done for Christ?" And I said, "Now, is this a question for me, or is this a Jesus Cartel question?" She says, "Definitely a Jesus Cartel question." And so, and I like that. I was like, "Well, we're headed to go film it now, you know." And so that's the question. I haven't put a lot of thought into it. I know that we've both done a lot of radical things. So why don't we defer this one to you first and tell us about it?
Sure. You know, when you mentioned it to me right before we started preaching to each other, and I did take a second to kind of roll some things through my mind, and I want to tell you kind of just the process that my mind went through when I was spinning on this question. The first response I had, and this is genuine as genuine could be, was, have I really done anything radical? Have I really done anything radical at all? There have been some things that I've definitely done, and I'll get into in a little bit, that were extremely challenging, very difficult decisions to make. Most people probably would not have made those same decisions in my shoes, and it was exclusively for the cause of Christ. However, I'm an apples to apples guy. That's just how I am. You know, when people ask me, "Hey, are you good at baseball?" It's like, well, relatively, sure. You know, who are you comparing me to? When I think about, am I good at baseball, I think about the best baseball players, and comparatively, I'm okay. You know, and that's kind of me across the board. You know, there are very few things in life. I would say maybe there's probably two things in my life that I would be able to confidently say, like, I am as good as the best people you know at this thing. Outside of that, I just kind of find myself in the, hey, I'm okay. So when you ask me, what's the most radical thing you've done for Christ, there's definitely an answer, because she asked a relative question, which props to Ms. Robin for asking a good question. But when I just think about it, it's like comparatively, you know, I think about, first off, Christ himself and the radical length he went to procure our salvation, our forgiveness, to restore authority back to us in our life, to set us free from the law, and all the things that he did, and the thought that it just took, and the obedience and execution in the midst of difficulty. And then you go further back. Now you think about all of the martyrs and people who, you know, stepped in the gap there and knew what was coming, stepped into it anyways. It's like, it's hard for me to use the word radical for myself and feel fair about it. Now, the question is, what's the most radical thing that you've done? And there is an answer to that, because I can tell you, my first thing was I thought about places that I've been And I've been on a few trips ministering the gospel around the world, and every trip has its challenges, for sure. But one of the trips I went on was more challenging than the others, for a lot of reasons, especially considering, right before we left, there was some heavy persecution against the church in the city that we were going to. But even that, it didn't really strike me as something that was extremely radical. It was a moment of obedience, sure, but I don't know, probably from the Lord or whatever, but I just kind of had a peace about it. As difficult as the leaving was, that was the only time it was really hard to leave my wife and children, because it was the only time that there was ever a real question mark to me about whether or not we come back from it, which was difficult. But the trip itself, we ran into a couple of things that seemed like they were going to be dangerous, but ended up being misunderstandings. So that didn't feel super radical either. And so, but here's my answer. I have walked away from financial well-being for my family twice in my life. When I say financial well-being, I don't mean financial comfort. I mean, I don't know how we're going to make it if I walk away from this situation. And I've done that twice in my life for the cause of Christ, for the sake of what is right and what is good. And that's probably realistically the most radical thing that I've ever done, because the opposition I faced from people was astronomical. People who should have understood and instead persecuted me for it and came after me for it. And, you fast forward through all of the mud. Now everybody on the back end of those two decisions can see clearly. It's like, hey, he nailed both of those, But in the midst of it all, it just seemed senseless. And, man, I just have so many details just flooded me right now as I even really think through all of that. But that for sure would be the most radical thing that I'd ever done. And the irony of it all is they both involved the same thing, but one was a position of going into, and one was a position of exiting. And they were both. I was persecuted equally for both, and they were both the right decisions at the right time. And you just have to do what God shows you to do. And God spoke a supernatural word to me both times, in the going and in the walking away. And so there was never a question of whether or not it was the right thing. The problem was I was up a creek financially, stepping into it and stepping out of it. Stepping into it meant no salary. Stepping out of it meant walking away from a salary. And that's our livelihood. That's a, hey, honey, I'm not exactly sure how we're going to pay our bills, but this is what we have to do, because to not do this means to co-sign these things. And co-signing these things would be against what I believe is the character of Christ. And so we have to, as a family, step away from this. And I would say it helps so much to have a supportive wife, and a wife who trusts you and your leadership, especially in a circumstance like that. Because there was no path, like you have a supernatural word to go or a supernatural word to leave, but neither one of those situations, in the coming or the going, did Jesus reveal to me how we were going to be okay. Say, hey, this is like, I need you to go into this, but I'm going to provide for you here. Or, hey, I need you to exit this, but I'm going to provide for you here. There was no clear path either way. And so the question is like, well, what are we going to do now? And my response was, whatever I have to. I'm going to do whatever I have to keep us afloat until something reveals itself. And both times, Jesus created a path. But he created the path after the obedience, not before. And so many times we make our decisions based on whether or not something's God's will, based on whether or not we see provision for ourselves first. And the provision from the Lord doesn't come before obedience. It comes after obedience. And so a lot of people will say, hey, look, I have faith in God. I trust God. I always put God's will first in my life. But they can't make a decision that puts them in a spot of the unknown. And it's like, well, where's the faith? Where's the faith that God's going to come through? That you should not be afraid of being provided for financially if you have faith in the Lord. And so this was the very moment I was confronted with. It's like, here I am talking about all this faith all the time. Well, here we have an opportunity I've got security here if I'll just be quiet. Or I could do what the Lord has supernaturally spoken to me to do, and this is going to put me in a spot where I don't know which way's up for a minute. Maybe longer than a minute. I don't know. But I had to walk it out because I have to be who I say I am. If I'm not who I say I am under pressure, then I'm not this person at all. Mm-hmm. And so that would be the most radical thing that I ever did is, because it was radical enough to do it once. It was unbelievable when I had to go home and tell my wife I have to do it a second time. Because when you survive something like that, I say survive is probably not a great word. When the Lord guides you through a situation like that, or a certain trial, we never anticipate experiencing that trial again. We think, okay, well, we passed that one. We may have to deal with some other stuff in life, but we won't have to do this again. It's like when you lose a parent. The last thing you think is you'll lose another one in a week. We've seen some instances of stuff like that happen, but it's not what's on your mind. You're like, okay, well, that was terrible, but we're going to get through it. And then bang, another one. And so it was that kind of deal. Is when the Lord brought me through that situation the first time, and that was like 2016-ish. Mm-hmm. When he brought me through it the first time, I was like, wow, like that was such a good moment. Pat myself on the back a little bit because like I'm glad I stood for what I believed in that moment, and the Lord brought me through it, and now everybody has seen that the faithfulness was warranted in the situation. Thank God I never had to do that again. And then you fast forward a little while, and then bang, you got to do it again and go home and be like, hey, look, I know that it shouldn't be, but unfortunately, there's what God wants. And then there's what man wants. And unfortunately, sometimes the one interferes with the other. God has a perfect plan and a perfect will, but it requires everybody to understand who they are and operate in that capacity for that to flesh out, because God doesn't force it. It's not that he couldn't, it's that he chooses not to. God doesn't force his way. And so we have roles that we have to play. And sometimes people don't play their role. And when people don't play their role, it affects us, and so I had a choice of whether or not I was going to protect our financial well-being, or was I going to stand on what I believed was right and good, and I have repeatedly displayed the fact that I will not be compromised by financial well-being. And so let that be a lesson to anyone who wants to tempt me with finances. I will not bite. But that for me, for sure, that's a pretty easy answer.
Well, yeah, and I was able to watch the first one, even though we didn't know each other as well, and then really participate in the second one, and they were both equally as strong there. And so with me, my answer is I can't give a straight answer. I'm gonna give you a lot of answers there. When I first got saved, I was part of a it was rumored that I was part of a group called the God Squad, and the God Squad was a group of hitmen that would just do whatever God called them to do. And so there are rumors that we climbed up a second story of a building, snuck into a window, got a guy that was in the bed with a girl that he shouldn't have been in the bed with, rolled him up in a sheet and blanket, and kidnapped him and brought him to the church, and had clothes for him and everything, and made him sit in that church service, and he later got saved. So there's a rumor there that would be something kind of radical, kidnapping for Christ,
Become all things, Paul says.
Yeah, be all things, all people. So I've also preached in over 20 countries. The most difficult of those was in DR Congo, and things were difficult, and they were difficult at the airport. They were difficult dealing with the embassy. They were difficult with all kinds of not the embassy, but dealing with the diplomats there. They were difficult. The preaching, everything that we did was difficult, and we our accommodations were difficult. We were staying in an abandoned Catholic monastery. So an old Catholic monastery that is abandoned that nobody else lives in now. We were staying there and renting rooms there, and so that was difficult. And so it's the only place that we actually left early. So while Brother Dave was preaching, I went and found ways for us to leave early. And so when I came back and preached one more time, and then we left. So it was a pretty difficult thing. We don't tell our families about that one too much. So, and then another radical thing. So, kidnapping people for Christ, staying in abandoned Catholic monasteries in third world countries. Those are, up there. Praying and believing for God to restore a marriage after the man had gotten divorce papers 3 times. That's pretty radical.
Yeah.
Had to step out of my comfort zone with that one. That's pretty radical. But I would say, and this is a shame, but so I would say that I prayed for a lady in Mexico and believed that she would be healed, and she hadn't walked in 14 years. And was in a wheelchair, and I really believed that she was going to be healed, and I prayed for her in front of hundreds, if not over 1,000 people, and she was healed right there in front of God and everybody. And the next thing you know, her and I are both running around the gym, and I don't know which was a bigger miracle at the time, was me or her running around the gym, but at the time. But yeah, because, she hadn't walked in 14 years. I was 294 pounds at the time, so I don't know which one was a bigger miracle. But it is a shame. But I think if the world looked at my life, I think they would pick a different moment or a different time when they said, and he's probably the most radical for Christ. And I wouldn't pick this, but I think that a lot of people would. And that is that I have been with the same woman for 30 years.
That's good.
And I love her the way Christ loves the church.
That's right.
And I'm not even going to say to the best of my abilities. I'm just going to say that I love her the way Christ loves the church, because that's what we're called to do. And so I think that probably the most radical thing that the world says that I do is the way I love my wife and then my family. And I do put it that way, my wife and then my family. And that's a big part of loving her the way Christ loves the church, And so I think that that's a shame in this day and age, but I think that's what a lot of people would say is that, hey, he's, not only been with the same woman very faithfully for 30 years, but that he loves her the way God commanded us to love her. So.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
I don't know if that's the way you wanted the question, Robin, but that's what you got. I think you got 2 very detailed answers and very truthful answers from Andrew Scull and Clay Russell.
Yeah, take it or leave it.
Yeah, it is what it is.
So last week we talked about commitment. We were going through some of the keys to success or being successful, and commitment was kind of the topic of the day. I think we had intended to do a few, but it just never seems to work out when we try to do more than one of anything. But I want to at least touch on, and we may have to continue it, but we got like 15 minutes or so. What is the second key?
So first, I'll just remind everybody, this is just something we looked up, 10 keys to being successful and achieving your goals. And the first one, we thought that was very intriguing that they put commitment first. Usually people put commitment towards the back, and I think that tells you something about those people. So for this list to have commitment first, for us, we're like, this is a list we could dig, you know, and so this is worth our time. And so the second thing was to learn from the journey.
Yeah.
Learn from the journey. And so when I went to go teach this class, all I did was read Learn from the Journey. And so I went in and talked for the next 20 or 30 minutes about not making the same mistake twice. I taught about, learning from your mistakes, learning from things that you go through. I talked about learning from other people's mistakes and troubles and those kind of things instead of having to do it all yourself. So, learn from the journey. But that's not what they meant. So after I talked for like 30 minutes, then I went back and read their paragraph, and I don't have it with me today, but their paragraph was more about getting better during the journey. So that when they said learn from the journey, they were talking about getting better from the journey. So what I took away from it is not just reaching our goals, but getting better as we go to reach our goal. So it wasn't so much about accomplishing the goal as it was being bigger, better, stronger, and faster when you got there. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today, and kind of wanted to get your insight on a little bit today is, in life we have goals, we make goals and everything, but so many times it's all about reaching the goal. Yeah. And you get to the end of the finish line and you reach the goal, but you're weak and you're tired and you need a vacation, and all this kind of stuff. But that's not what they were talking about. So just kind of wanted to get your mindset. I know you hadn't put any thought into this whatsoever, but just give us some ideas about not just meeting your goals, but being the best version of yourself when you can get there. What do you think about that?
I'm a trial and error guy.
Okay.
I've said that repeatedly on here, but it's because it's so true. It's how I have learned most of what I've learned in life is through trial and error. Trial and error for me isn't it's not taxing. I think trial and error is very taxing for a lot of people because they take failure really hard. I'm a baseball guy. Failure is part of it. And so I'm willing to sacrifice my next 4 at-bats to have success in the 5th one. And so if somebody tells me, hey, look, man, try this. This will work for you. I will. I will try it. A lot of times people have such a hard time letting go of what they know that they can't really give anything else an honest shake. You take somebody who's been told, you know what, I'm going to refrain from using a diet metaphor this week. I like to play chess.
Okay.
It's there's so many variables in chess, and if you look at a chessboard, you wouldn't think that there are that many variables. So there's a very limited amount of pieces. It's a very small board relative to the game, but there are so many things that could happen. Here's how I get better at chess. I pay attention to how I lose. Mm-hmm. I didn't get so much better at chess by figuring out ways to win. I got a lot better at chess figuring out how I kept losing. And so what I learned was how to respond when certain type of pressures start to come my way. And once I got my pressure responses good, it got me through the difficulty of it, and then I was able to mount an offense afterwards. And so the trial and error is the same kind of thing. It gives me the opportunity to figure out what's going wrong. And so I'll try something and then I'll fail in this particular way. And then I'll try something different and then I fail. Well, now I can find a commonality between those two failures. It's like, okay, those look different, but what's the common link, And I'll isolate it and then I'll try a third thing. And if that same common element appears in all 3 failures, I know that that's what has to be fixed. And a lot of times that's how I progress forward. And so, for me, the journey is exactly what you're saying. It's a journey. It's not a game. It's a path that we're going to continue moving forward on. Good, bad, or ugly, you're going to continue moving forward. A lot of people think, I hear people talk about taking steps back. There are no steps back in a journey. There's only steps forward. Now, you may have stepped in something awful, but you're going forward, And so for me, as I'm progressing forward, as I'm moving forward in life, I'm looking for those common elements that give me trouble. This is why I'm a worst case scenario thinker.
Right.
If I can figure out what the worst possible thing is that could happen to me and I can prevent that from happening, then I go to the second worst thing. And so my whole life is about managing failure. It's not about avoiding failure. It's about managing my failure and setting myself up to where the failures that I do have are very minuscule. So you'll very rarely see me fail in a major way.
Right.
You'll see me fail in some little things, and then you'll see me make corrections so that those don't happen again. But I really pay a lot of attention to address any massive things that could go wrong. And so as the years have gone by and I've experienced so many different types of failure, I have an ironclad methodology of how to progress through any situation to basically assure myself not of success, but of limiting my failures.
Yeah.
And if you can limit your failures well, the opportunity to be successful is tremendous. Yeah. And so because we're kind of slow on time, I'm just put a pin in that.
Yeah.
Man. What about you?
I agree. For me, I'm a process guy. So, learning along the journey is natural for me. I like to learn along the journey. And like I said, if we talked about this in the form of fitness, well, that's real simple.
Sure.
You had a goal and you didn't just get there. You got better and better and better and better and you got to the goal. And so, if your goal is to lift 225 pounds 20 times, you're not just going to walk in and do that. You had to get to this, get to that, and all that. So you learn from the journey. But if you take fitness out, and let's just say your goal was to read 6 books, okay? Well, you get to the end of it, and you're like, check, I accomplished that. I read 6 books in the amount of time that I said I was going to read it in.
Yeah.
Okay, what books did you read? Well, first it was, I don't know real sure. Well, it was this one. Okay, well, what did you learn? And so, and if we only got one thing out of each book, I'm not really the guy that says, well, if one person comes or get one thing. No, you read 350 pages. If you didn't get but one thing, that was probably a waste of time. We probably should pick our books better next time. And so if we get to the end of reading books, and all we are is needing a nap, and we didn't get bigger, stronger, better, faster during this time, then we probably had the wrong goal.
Yeah.
So I just think that we need to not focus on the goals, on the end result of the goal so much as focus, let me say it like this, not focus on the goal as much as we focus on the end result of the goal. Why are we doing this goal anyhow? Why are we reading 6 books? Reading 6 books so that we can get better spiritually, financially, better with our family, better at giving it out to other people. Why was this a goal anyhow? So I think a lot of times it goes back to the why. Why were we doing this anyhow? And why, and so what did we accomplish? Where are we at? And so I think that so many times people focus so much on accomplishing it that they really forget why they did it in the first place and don't get the full benefits from why we're going after this goal. So I think that's what they were trying to say. I agree. I mean, we want to learn through everything that we do. We want to be learners. We want to grow.
And the other thing is that, people a lot of times take a situation that has worked for them in the past and assume that that's going to work in all situations, and it doesn't, man. The responses are different. Just to continue with the chess analogy, because I've been playing a lot lately. If you and I play a game of chess right now, and I win, and we play a second game of chess, and I play the exact same moves that I played in the last game, I will probably lose the second game because you will defend differently because of what you learned from the first game. And so many times I see people attack life the same way. It's like, well, this has always worked for me in the past. And so they just put blinders on and move straight to that. And they're not even paying attention to what's developing around them. because they've got blinders on towards what they're trying to do. And then they look up later and they're like, well, that didn't work.
Yeah, why did that not work?
Yeah.
And they're oblivious. They're like, I can't believe it didn't work.
Yeah, and so it's definitely something you got to pay attention to is the things that are developing around you. You need to learn to calculate. And you had mentioned, this is what made me think about that, is you had mentioned, like, you're not one who believes, well, if even one person has success, then it was all worth. We spent $10 million and one person got saved, then that was worth the $10 million. And it's like, I understand the sentiment of what they're saying. And yes, that is a valuable person, and we're so glad that they gave their life to the Lord. But what we also have to understand is, reallocated correctly,
we ain't got that many millions.
Yeah,
Right.
reallocated correctly, that 10 million probably could have saved thousands, and so it's
6 billion people in the world.
That's
we
right.
ain't got that many 10 millions.
That's right. And so, we have to learn to be efficient. We can't call everything a success. That's the other deal. People are so like hell bent on wanting to be successful that they'll call anything that wasn't an utter collapse a success. And it's like, dude, this is not going well.
Yeah, that's
like,
difficult.
take a step back and look at what you have. You can't, I'm going to make 2 points. One, you got to be honest. Look at this, understand this isn't going well. Two, nobody cares how many home runs you hit yesterday.
There you go.
We're playing a different game.
There you
You know,
go.
we got to move on.
My last 2 sermons, I've mentioned that. So no matter what you did in the past doesn't mean that you do it the same way now and get the same results.
Yeah.
In fact, a baseball analogy, Babe Ruth said, I can't win today's games on yesterday's home runs.
That's exactly the quote I was
Yeah,
thinking of when I
and
said
so,
that. Yeah.
so we got to make sure that we're not just blindly doing what we've done in the past and expecting the same results. You used the analogy of chess. Same way playing Madden or college football.
Sure.
Cooper tells all of his friends how good I am at college football. Okay, he tells all his friends, my dad can beat you, my dad's going to beat you, my dad's better than you. And it's kind of weird for a 17-year-old, but he's not 12,
Yeah.
and but he tells all his friends. And so his friends come over and they, some of them just know they're going to be defeated already, so they won't play. But other ones, want the challenge, so they're going to play the old man. And I beat every single one of them. But there's a reason why I beat them. I run a very unique offense that is very difficult to defend if you've never seen it before. It's an offense that's planned to run 12 to 15 plays a drive, but if you don't defend it well, then it could be over in 2 plays. I could score a touchdown, 1 or 2. And so it's not a lot of Hail Marys. There's a lot of strategic things and but it's very, very simple. Now, Cooper beats me almost every time. I beat him probably 2 or 3 times out of 10 now.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I quit before we ever get finished because he's done blown me out.
Yeah.
But I can beat all of his friends, even the ones that are good enough to come close to beating him, because they've never seen this offense before.
Yeah, that's right.
We can't continue to do the same things and expect the same exact results, and we have to be able to adapt and move out of those things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, if that were the case, then you would have, one fighter who was unbeatable, and he would just do the exact same combination every single time, but every time he steps into a cage or boxing ring or whatever, the guys have watched his previous fights,
Yes.
and they're making adjustments and trying to attack him new ways, which is what makes people like your John Joneses so impressive, is that even though they've had so many variable changes, they've still managed to have extreme success.
They've changed.
That's right. Same with any undefeated sports team.
Yeah.
That's
You adapt your
yeah.
offense.
And then you take like the Patriots. I can't remember the year off top of my head, but they were undefeated going all the way into the Super Bowl and then lost the Super Bowl.
Yep.
Someone found an adaptation that they weren't prepared to handle, and it's like, that's the game.
Yep.
That's the game. And so now, was the season a success? Depends on who you ask.
Right.
If you ask Tom Brady, it wasn't.
Yeah, he went 19-1.
Yeah, yeah. And so you ask another person, just kind of a fly-by-nighter. It's like, oh, we only lost 1 game the whole season. That's a good season. It's like, is that what you wanted though?
Yeah.
Was your goal that You didn't totally collapse, or was your goal to actually succeed? Because you should set your goal for success at the beginning.
Amen.
And if you don't accomplish that, then it wasn't a success. You can't alter what is success. I'm going to do it. We're sorry. We're wrapping up the episode. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. If your goal was to lose 30 pounds and you lost 3, we can't go, yeah,
we got it,
we
man.
did it.
We're better than we were yesterday.
3 pounds, No, you did not meet your goal. You don't get to alter your goal. And look, sometimes variables come into play that affect that. That's okay. But don't treat that like success. Reset, set a goal again, and attack again. But don't trick yourself into saying success. There may have been, you may have got pneumonia real bad and couldn't work out, and it affected the way that you're eating, and it's a very legitimate reason for why you didn't reach your 30-pound goal. But let's not still call it success. Let's say, hey, look, there was a variable I didn't plan for. It caused me to fail. I'm acknowledging I didn't reach my goal. Now that I'm past this, I'm going to set a new goal of this, and we're going to make a new attack plan and go after it.
What do you think that which do you think that Tom Brady brags the most about? The Tampa Bay year where they, barely make it into playoffs, or, whatever, and their final record was 13-7, but they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Or the year that they went undefeated and then lost the Super Bowl and was 19-1.
Yeah.
He's going to brag about the Super Bowl.
That's
Why?
right.
Because he accomplished the goal. His goal wasn't to win 19 games. Couldn't care less about winning 19 games. His goal is to win the Super Bowl.
That's right. Yeah, it's about being the last man standing when you're confronting your goals and your obstacles. It either took you out or you took them out. There is no in between.
Man, this turned out to be a pretty cool episode.
Yeah, quick one, but I enjoyed it. You got anything else?
No, man, I'm good. Thank y'all for listening. Tell all your friends to listen to Jesus Cartel.
I'll be good.